Contessa, the World Health Organization has declared the coronavirus outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. They are saying they are doing this not because they don't have confidence in the way China is responding to this outbreak, but because of the concern that it could spread to countries with weaker healthcare systems. Remember, they met for 2 days last week and declined to declare this that public health emergency of international concern. And now they are doing so after seeing the broader spread. And again, as they say, they are worried it could spread.
Lehman Brothers is going bankrupt, and financial markets from Asia to Europe are doing their utmost to prevent Monday from turning from dark to black. Employees of America's fourth largest investment bank saw the writing on the wall late Sunday after talks to pull them back from the abyss collapsed. British firm Barclays Bank said no thanks, while Bank of America decided instead to help another struggling bank, Merrill Lynch, in a merger deal worth over $50 billion. The U.S. government said it won't bail out Lehman, which last week announced $3.9 billion in losses.
This is Bruno. His job is to take a pizza off the end of this line and put it into the oven. Pretty cool, huh?
Not only does Bruno make a great artisanal pizza pie, he never calls in sick. For argument's sake, it's a he. He never needs a vacation, no pension or benefits, and he doesn't complain. In many ways, he's the perfect employee.
The other major story tonight, the global aftershocks after that vote in Britain, and for so many around the world, a stunning result, deciding to leave the European Union to go it alone. Wall Street here at home plummeting more than 600 points, and the faces in Britain, those who thought there was no way this could happen. Then another surprise, the Prime Minister of Britain announcing his resignation, walking back into 10 Downing Street, his arm around his wife. And here in America, fear over Americans and their savings. The Dow ending the day down more than 600.
They've fast become part of the new way we're living. Queues and big waits just to get the basics.
And it was quite sad watching a lot of old people stand in the queue, and it was so hot.
This supermarket west of Auckland was one facing the sudden big lines and endless customers.
But now the queues are gone, and it's because technology's come along to make life just a little bit easier. You can sit in the
Lehman Brothers now go to court, where a judge will take control of the bank until its assets are sold. The implications could be profound.
Every event we hear on the news at the moment seems to be unprecedented. We seem to be living at a time of great turbulence and huge unpredictability. What will happen next? And yet, to do strategy, we need to have a deep understanding of what the firm's external environment is. And it's not just the headline news items of global events like COVID-19. We also need to recognise that different industries have different levels of competition and different pressures that mean performance in those sectors will be different. So how do we go about understanding that external environment to the depth we need to allow us to make strategic decisions? Well, in strategy, we divide up that external environment into a broad macro or general environment, and then an industry environment, or microenvironment as it is sometimes called. The macro environment influences that industry environment, which in turn influences the firm. And it works the other way. What the firm does also influences its industry environment, which then in turn influences the macro environment. To look at the industry environment, typically we'll be using Michael Porter's 5 forces analysis. What it's saying is the firm's performance in generating value, whether that's for its shareholders or other stakeholders, is driven by the intensity of competition in the industry. And that competition doesn't just come from the firm's rivals and peers. The firm's suppliers and its customers are also in competition to get the most value out of the activities happening in that industry. And then prices, and therefore returns, are suppressed by the threat of new entrants or the threat of substitutes. There is another video that deals in depth with the 5 forces and how to use that framework. For that industry microenvironment, we do though need to be clear about the definition of the industry and making sure that the boundaries that we're drawing around that industry are meaningful in terms of the buying behaviour that customers are demonstrating. Often we will find that there are subgroups the real competitive set a firm is facing. And here, strategic group mapping is needed to make sure you're focusing your analysis of the industry environment into the right space. A strategic group consists of rivals with similar competitive approaches in the industry. They'll share characteristics around perhaps the same price and quality that they're offering to customers. They operate in the same geographic area, so are targeting the same customers. The rivals in the same group are then in direct competition, but those in other strategic groups cannot be ignored. They are potential new entrants and providers of substitute products and services. This diagram shows a strategic group analysis for auto manufacturers using car performance against price. Typical family car manufacturers like Toyota, Ford, General Motors competing for specific customers in terms of price and quality and features of the car. Whilst manufacturers like BMW and Audi are competing for different customers who want higher performance, but then to the very high performance cars like Porsche, Lamborghini, Ferrari, who compete for a different yet still group of customers. Each of those groups may decide to bring in a model that competes in one of the other areas. Porsche producing cars that compete against BMW, or Ford introducing a supercar. But the dynamics of the competition within a group are separate and distinct to that strategic group. Moving on to the macro environment. Typically here we'll use models such as PESTLE or PEST or STEEPLE as it's sometimes called. All these models are pigeonholes in which to make sure we're thinking about the range of issues in the macro environment. Each letter standing for a different aspect of that macro environment. So for PESTLE, the political environment, the economic environment, the social environment, so things like demographics, cultural behaviours, etc. The T stands for technology, the new technology changes that are emerging in the world. The second E is the environment, and the L is the legal regulatory environment that is at play. In PEST, the environmental aspect is included within the social, the S term. The legal regulatory area is included in the P for political environment. Now we need to be careful when looking at the macro environment. Not all the trends and issues operating at that broad level will impact onto the firm. Some will be incidental. We do need to look at where those trends will have most impact. Typically, a macro environmental trend will impact the firm where it changes the industry environment. So whether political, economic, social or technological changes impact on the 5 forces model. So when we think about our PESTLE analysis, we need to look at how those trends and changes will change the industry dynamics. It's not always straightforward. As we said earlier, we live in highly uncertain and turbulent times. So a challenge for strategists is, what do we do when it's impossible to predict the future? There's a spectrum in terms of that unpredictability of the future. For some industries, even now, you can develop a clear enough single view of the future that will allow you to make predictions, and so to do a strategic plan. In other industries, there is total ambiguity. There's very few industries, though, are in that space. There will be a number of areas where there is uncertainty and unpredictability, but lots of areas where you are fairly certain of what will happen. In a world where there is total ambiguity, you are unable to make predictions about the future. As a result, you'll be relying on techniques like stress testing, setting boundaries in terms of outcomes that you want the firm to survive through, and building flexibility and contingency into your decisions. Where the future is uncertain, but where you can scope out a range of possible futures, you'll be looking at using tools like scenario planning. In this, there is no one scenario which is more probable than others. You're looking at a range of futures, and then across those range of futures, looking at what no regret decisions you can make. There's decisions that are good in any of those possible futures, but also identifying where you have to make informed bets around the future, where the outcomes will be different in different scenarios. A often used scenario planning approach is the Shell method. The Shell method has been around for several decades, and what you do is that you rate the different issues and trends, the different environmental factors that are playing in the macro environment in terms of their level of impact onto the industry and the level of uncertainty. There's an important word there, uncertainty. It is not the distinction between not happening or happening, it's the degree to which you just don't know. You use those assessments as two axes to plot those issues and trends, like this. Having done that, you identify the two issues, trends that are most uncertain and will have most impact on the firm, and use those two factors to describe 4 different scenarios. Now, because you have high uncertainty around the outcomes of factor 1 and factor 2, those different scenarios are equally likely. You then build stories around each of those scenarios using what you do know about what that future will be like. What you're doing here is recognizing that there can be a wide range of possible futures, and you're sampling those futures such that when you consider each scenario, you're looking at what works across the whole range of futures and what are the things that will only be good for some of those futures. Here is an example of the output of a scenario planning process that I was involved in with an insurance company in the early 2000s. The 2 factors that were seen as having the highest impact and had the highest level of uncertainty was whether insurance would be bought as a standalone product or if it would be wrapped up with other purchases. And then the second factor was the extent to which customers would buy insurance directly from insurance companies or through another intermediary, such as a bank or a supermarket or another brand. Using these 2 factors as axes in the Shell approach to scenario planning, defined 4 scenarios, which the executive team then worked through, seeing the strategic response they'd make in each of those futures. Out of that came a set of moves which were no regret, which were implemented. And then further discussions evolved around the bets that they wanted to take into the future. And that is what led to choices then being made in the strategy they developed going forward. So the external context. Good strategy requires a profound understanding of that external environment. That external environment can be divided up between the macro environment and the industry environment, or microenvironment as it's sometimes called. In that industry environment, you're looking to understand the boundaries of the industry in which you are competing, and then using Porter's 5 Forces framework to analyse the dynamics of that industry. The macro environment, you're looking at broader issues, the political, economic, social, technological trends and issues that are occurring. But be careful to make sure that the things you're looking at do have a significant impact onto the industry environment. So onto Michael Porter's 5 Forces. We live in a period of great uncertainty, and there's only some industries that you can make reliable predictions about the future. Here we need to think about a range of possible futures and use techniques such as scenario planning to ensure our strategy decision is robust across that range of futures, and be transparent about where we're making strategic bets. Thank you for listening.